Hi there, welcome to Floating in Dreams. This video is going to be the one where I go back to some older eyeshadow palettes and ask myself the question, are these still any good? Welcome to everybody watching today. Thank you so very much for joining me. This video is a monthly series that I like to do on here to go back to some older palettes, try them out again, and really ask myself the question, like, do I still like these if I hold them up to today's makeup standards? Have these stood the test of time? Are they gems or are they junk and are they just not that great? So I had a bit of a spring edit going on, so I'll mention in a minute exactly which eyeshadow palettes I decided to feature this month. But before we get into that, it may be good to know that I have fair skin with a cool to neutral undertone, which greatly skews my makeup preferences. And because I have been buying, trying, and reviewing makeup for more than a decade, I also have some very strong opinions. And if you're into eyeshadow palettes, as in Catrice, and getting the use out of your makeup, then this may be the channel for you. So I hope you like to stick around, join the Snow Angel family by clicking subscribe down below. So what eyeshadow palettes was I going back to? When I showed you these in my Shop My Stash at the start of the month, that's right. If you want to know exactly which eyeshadow palettes will be featured in this video every month, all you need to do is check out my Shop My Stash, because that sort of gives you a lowdown of everything that I'm trying out that month, also like what new things there may be in my life, and that I just want to give a whirl. So these are the 5 I selected originally, but then I filmed my spring makeup my spring palette video in April, and I decided to rope this one in as well. So my original selection were 2 of the Lime Crime Venus palettes, so the Venus 3 and the Prelude Chroma. Those were 2 I tried, and then I played around with 3 of these little Huda Beauty Obsessions palettes, so the Nude, Rich, Light, and Sand Haze are in here. And I decided to go back to my Nabla Soul Blooming, and I've created one of my favorite looks I like to do with this, which is what's on my eyes today. So I hope you're here for that. Let me chat about these 6 eyeshadow palettes. I will be linking you to any reviews I have with these, so if you want to see swatches and like close-ups of looks that I did with these, you can see that as well, but I will also be inserting images of all of the different looks I did with these palettes as I was trying them out this month, so that you can really see what the quality is like, even though these are some of my older palettes that have been out for a while and that have been in my collection for a while. First thing I think that I played with was the Prelude Chroma, actually, from Lime Crime. So this is part of their 8 Pan Venus series. They're a bit chunky. That's one of the things I've always disliked about these palettes, is how chunky they are for what we get inside. I mean, this could have been like half the size and it would have been so much easier to store. This is one of my favorite eyeshadow palettes in terms of like teals and doing those kind of things. And we all know I love a good teal, and we get 3 really nice ones in here. So I really love the combination of this matte with that shimmer, and then this white actually has a green flip. So those are also the 3 shades I went with when I did a look with this again. I rarely go in the gold and the coral. I do sometimes like to use the purple that's in here, but the mattes in here are quite deep. So I definitely need that lighter beige shade to give this a good blend as well, because on my fair skin, this is just a little too stark of a difference, so I struggle blending those out. And then it's nice to have a lighter cream like this that can really help you to buff out the edges of your crease shade to give it more of a transitional kind of feel than this being really stark. I do have to say that the mattes in these, especially in this one, I feel they're quite dry, so they are not as blendable perhaps as I'd like them to be. I still really like the shades in here. I'm definitely going to keep it around just because it has one of my favorite color stories of all time. That's another reason why this gets to stay, but I just think this is a really unique palette. There aren't a lot of brands doing things like this nowadays, so this is still definitely a good one. In terms of quality, I think that I actually like the quality of the other Lime Crime palette that I'm going to be talking about in a minute just a touch better, because like I mentioned, the mattes in here are a bit difficult to work with. They tend to skip. You really need to give them a good buff to really get a nice gradient, and they are just, I wouldn't say too pigmented, but they're just a little bit more difficult to work with than I think most mattes you know, nowadays, like if I compare it to other mattes I've played with since this came out, that I just feel are a bit easier to use. But I don't have mattes like this anywhere else in my collection, and I just really enjoy that shimmer. It's this really nice murky greeny teal with a bit of a shine to it. And then especially if you top a little bit of this over it, it's a game changer, and I love using that as an inner corner highlight. So I always feel that this palette just gives me that, like if I want that teal look, this is the palette I think of, so that's why it gets to stay in my collection for sure. But I don't think that if you were to see this in the store nowadays, that this is necessarily worth picking it up with your money nowadays. There is definitely better eyeshadow out there. But I think this is actually older because I think the Prelude collection came out after the Venus 3 was released. And I have to say that I like the quality of these a bit better. Maybe it's to do with the fact that these tend to blend in with my skin tone a lot better. And this is an eyeshadow palette that's been on the chopping block for me in the past. Mainly because I felt it was very similar to the Nabla Soul Blooming that I'm wearing right now. But I feel that this does offer something differently. Now that I've tried them in like the same number of weeks, actually I tried out most of these palettes in like the past week or so. That's when I created most of these looks. And I wore this look when I was filming some videos, so you will have seen the look already, but there's a close-up shot here as well. But there's a close-up shot here as well for your viewing pleasure. And with this palette, I always go into those purples. That's what I want to go for. And the reason why I say that this is different from the Soul Blooming is because I feel this is a bit more warm-toned. But again, such a good spring palette. This is very much spring in a palette for me. And as much as I'm not a warm-toned lover, there were a lot of you who were giving me compliments on the look that I was wearing the day I wore this palette. I always say I have cool to neutral tone skin in my intros, precisely because I know I can get away with a lot of warm tones. Actually, I just prefer a cooler toned look on myself because I feel it's more flattering. But I can pull off warm tones, and this is one of the more warm leaning palettes that I feel I can get down with. Everything here has a bit of a warmer undertone, save for the purples, but therefore they clash quite nicely with the rest. We get something that's a little like taupey brown, and we get a nice like warmer brown here as well. The only shade that doesn't really, you know, do much for me is this very light, almost like satiny kind of shade. This is a really nice peachy tone shimmer that, again, I need to reach for some more. But the look I created, I think I did go in with that like corally shade just to try it out. And I thought it was a lot prettier on me than I had expected just looking at it in a pan. This is one of the reasons a lot of people always want swatches of eyeshadow palettes, but this is why I show you the looks I created, because I feel that if you blend an eyeshadow out on your eye shape, it's going to look a lot differently with a brush than what it looks like if you were to put it on like the flat plane of your forearm with a finger swatch. It's just not gonna give you the same color payoff, which is why I feel that that's a bit of a surprise, because if I were to take that corally shade as is, like the way it looks in the pan and the way it swatches out on me, I wouldn't think I'd like it, but I loved it as a transition. Like crease shade, like I don't really do transition shades. I just do crease shades and then I just blend them out. And I felt it worked really well, and it worked really well together with the purpley shades in here. So I thought it was a really good, more warm-leaning spring look that I got out of this, and now I'm very happy that I didn't get rid of this last year when this was on the chopping block. And then I took my Huda Beauty palettes and I actually put my money where my mouth was, because I kept saying how I think these are perfect in tandem with one another and not just as standalone palettes. I have said in the past how I think the Huda Beauty smaller palette line is really great at mixing and matching. So if you feel you're missing a shade in palette A, but you happen to have palette B, you can very nicely use them to complement each other. And I put that theory to the test by putting these together. I did do one or two looks with these like separately, so I know I did a look with just the nude light. I'm pretty sure of that. So let me show you that first then. This is the very light one. Granted, this is again a little bit more on the warm, like the warm spectrum, you could say. Warmer end of the spectrum. I love that shimmer here. This one right here, that's what's all over my lid. And I really, really enjoyed it. But I did want to make sure I had a little bit more depth with some of these. So I did pull in the Sand Haze. I actually did, the first time I started using these, I started creating a look with this. And I was like, yeah, that's a nice crease shade over here. But I don't think any of the shimmers go with it. So then I remember pulling, I believe, that shimmer into it, I believe. And then I also used some of the darker shades from this. Like I used this as liner, I think. So this is the Nude Rich, which is a bit more berry leaning. And then I also did a look with just this one, I believe. So I think I did 2 or 3 looks with these. And I definitely did like 1 or 2 where I like took shades from different palettes, and then at least 1 where I just used that one dedicated palette, which was this one. But these are such great palettes to just, I don't know, get a little bit more oomph out of it. Because for instance, if I put these side by side, the Sand Haze is here, and this is the Nude Rich. Like, do you just see that the Nude Rich continues where the Sand Haze kind of stops, you could say. And I feel the same way with, actually, if we put the Sand Haze and the Nude Light together, you can just see that this kind of like goes together like that as well. So a little bit more saturated, a little bit more like just a great way of bridging the gap between some of these. And you can definitely mix and match these. And I feel the undertones go together really well. I have to say though that now that I've tried these again, these are a little bit more warm toned again than I remembered them being, but I really enjoy the quality. These are some of the good Huda Beauty formula for sure. I still prefer her larger palettes over these ones for sure, but I think there are some stunning shimmers in here mostly. And I love mixing and matching these, so I could never get rid of these. I definitely think that next month I want to do another one of like a section of like shades from the Huda Beauty, like little palettes that I want to put together and like do some mixing and matching there as well, because that's what these are perfect for. If you have a couple of these, you can really play around with them and they can really give you a lot more options. And finally, the Nabla Soul Blooming, sadly discontinued, and till this day, one of my favorite spring palettes, which is why it was in my spring palette or like my discontinued palette video. It was like in either one of them or maybe possibly 2. And of course I had to go in with some of my favorite shades, which is these 4 essentially. I like the peachy tones here as well, but I already did some peachy tones with the Lime Crime, so I wanted to focus on the Periwinkles. And then you can just see that this is so much more cool tone leaning compared to the Lime Crime, where we get those purples that have a lot more warmth to them. These definitely lean more blue, and I still have the peach, but I'm contrasting the blue tone of my shirt as well as my eye color with more of a peach toned lip. This is one of the Ink Airy Velvets that I showed you in my haul at the start of the month. I've been slowly but surely trying some of these K-Beauty lip stains out, and I thought for this video, with this eye look, instead of like making the contrast on the eyes, I really like having the contrast in my entire look. And this way I have the cool tonedness on my eyes and that warmer peachy tone on my lips. And I think it's a really stunning spring look. This is definitely one of the older palettes in my makeup collection. It still performs really well. I was able to pull a stunning look out of it. I think these are still very pigmented. These aren't too crumbly. These still have the pigmentation. These shadows last, and the same goes for all of the other ones as well. I feel that the formulations, like what I remember them doing when I first tried them compared to now, I don't think these have changed at all, so these are still good to go. So that's it. That's my little roundup review of some eyeshadow palettes that I wanted to go back to. Let me know in a comment down below what palettes you have been using again, because I know a lot of you also enjoy going back to your older things and just getting more use out of them. I definitely, because I have quite a lot of makeup and I try out a lot of makeup for the channel, I always try to find that balance between, trying out new things for you guys, but also going back to my older palettes that I just love, because I just have so many eyeshadow palettes that I love and adore, and it would be such a shame if I could never go back to them again. So that's why I'm doing this series. So stay tuned for another one, because I will be back with another one of these towards the end of May. Stay tuned for my Shop My Stash, which will be the first video to go up in May on Tuesday, and then I will be showing you again what eyeshadow palettes will be featured. So a lot more content coming your way, as you know. So I hope you really enjoy the rest of your day. Happy Sunday, everybody, and I hope to see you again in my next video. Bye-bye!